is The Furnace with John Burton.
So I had the privilege and the honor to speak at a men's ministry event here in Branson, Missouri. And I spoke from my heart. I shared my testimony and then kind of dove into the topics of one of my books titled Piece of Cake. And the idea behind the book is that people tend to stay put. They tend to delay. They're afraid to move forward. They're afraid to take a step. It's kind of the idea that hiding out in a cave is better than advancing against the army. And so I shared, our story, my wife, Amy, and me and our kids, for the last 24 years of doing our very best to make sure that we were being led by the Holy Spirit every place that we were. And so we have said yes to several assignments over the last 24 years, and I can't imagine being in the same place that I was 5 years ago or 10 years ago or 20 years ago or 24 years ago. Why? Because God He's always doing new things. He's always taking us through seasons for the sake of our own growth, our own development, and then we get to apply those lessons in the next season of life. And so we continually shift and change and develop, and so I can look back at my time as a youth pastor in Dallas, Texas, for example, and I knew when we moved there so many years ago that my purpose for being there was not really so much for me to minister to other people, though of course that happened. Primarily the reason I was there was to grow. And I was in a church that was extremely different than the churches that I was used to. It was spirit-filled for sure, but it was a white collar, suit and tie kind of Assembly of God church, large church in Dallas, Texas. And so that's so I was now stepping into a corporate environment. I'm not speaking about its spirituality. I'm just talking about, the people that were there. They were executives. It was the richest Assembly of God church in all of Texas back then. And, and so that's what that's where God planted me. And so I knew, after being in San Diego for 2 years, that my time in Dallas may or may not be very long. And so I served there with passion. I learned a lot of lessons. I learned from people that did things very, very differently than the way that I would do things. I learned a lot of humility through a variety of tests and trials and different things, and just having to do things that I didn't think I'd have to do. Like mowing the lawn of this gigantic church for 8 hours every Friday, all day long, 8 or 9 hours a day in the raging heat of Texas. And so that wasn't fun. And then Amy and I got to, and Amy wasn't even on staff, she and I got to clean the bathrooms between the Sunday services and on and on. So all sorts of different things that we got to do. I didn't get to lead all the time the way that I would prefer to lead, and so a lot of humility tests for me there. But I knew that I had to pass those tests because I could work my way right out of God's process for my life, and so I did. I passed the test. I did, and I look back and I thank God that I was smart enough to do the right thing and just have the right heart and the right attitude and truly be a servant, and it's not about me and it's not about my ideas and all of that kind of stuff. But I wasn't supposed to stay there. And so that's when we planted our church in Manitou Springs. I can't imagine missing that assignment. Oh my goodness. And that's where the most bizarre, wild, supernatural just wonders and miracles and signs and happenings and oddities and all sorts of things happened, and oh my goodness, just transformed lives, and just on and on and on. Just I've written about so much of that, just ridiculous level supernatural stuff going on there as we developed that church, planted that church there, and helped start a prayer movement. We prayed in over 100 churches in the Colorado Springs area, and just so much. I mean, multiplied hours and prayer walking, days, weeks, years of prayer walking, and just on and on and on. And so I can't imagine missing out on what happened there in Manitou Springs. Well, that season came to an end. Seeing God made it extremely clear, and all of a sudden miracles started happening as we stepped out in great, crazy faith. After, we just bought Amy's dream house overlooking Pikes Peak, but God says, nope, time to move on. And, and God's working miracles through all these seasons. And, we didn't know how we were going to survive. He called us to move to the International House of Prayer in Kansas City, made it radically, wildly clear. And in a moment, as I'm preaching one night, the Lord spoke to me and said, today's the last day you're preaching in this church for a long, long time, and you're moving. And I told Amy. Amy immediately came up with two of the craziest ideas ever. Two God ideas. First idea was to put in Craigslist that we would be willing to stay in somebody's vacant house for free in Kansas City. And I'm thinking, what? What are you talking about? So we put the ad in, and a lady responded and said, I don't live there. I'm trying to sell my house. I live in Texas, and I would love for you to stay in my house for free. I love the International House of Prayer, and in fact, I want to support your ministry. So now we're living in Kansas City for free, actually not for free in a house. We are being paid by the owner of the house to stay in their house. And it was just stunning. And then the second idea my wife had was, let's put our house in Colorado Springs on the market. Not on the market for sale, but on the vacation rental market. And all of a sudden, we're making thousands of dollars a month on that house. So somebody's paying us to stay in a house that isn't ours, and we're being paid not to stay in the house that is ours. And so that transitioned us out of our season in Colorado into Kansas City. And then in Kansas City, we learned a lot and ministered a lot and grew a lot. And it was a challenging season. Some of you know that we lost 7 babies to miscarriage and stillbirth, and one of the most dramatic, difficult seasons was there at IHOP. Very, very challenging. And with some absolutely ridiculous, impossible God stuff that happened. I mean, you just look back. I'm not going to go into all the stories right now, but it's impossible what just happened. And so all of that's going on there, and then God spoke to us. It's time. And part of the impossible stuff was God signaling to us after 2 years that it was time to move on to Detroit, where we planted a church there. And initiated another prayer movement there. We were in over 70 churches in the Detroit area, and prayed from 10 to midnight in the Spirit, on fire, every single week, every single Friday night. And so we saw God do amazing things in Detroit, and just incredible stuff. Had a school of ministry there. And then we knew our season was done there. Now, I meet a lot of people that they wonder, get this, they wonder why they are not bearing fruit. And very often, there's a lot of reasons, but very often the reason is because they have not had the faith, the courage, or the obedience to move from a position that's safe and comfortable to them into the great unknown. Right? It's not everybody. Some people are called to stay locked in. Some people are most definitely called to move on out. For me, I can't imagine, living in the same place for a long time. We've lived here in Branson for 4.5 years, and started 3 businesses, and having the time of our lives. But this is the longest we've ever lived in a single house here in Branson. We've owned, I don't know what the number is, 8 houses or something like that. And just always shifting, because I can't imagine that, for example, Branson has everything God's called us to. Now, we may live here for a long time, but we also shift around and move around. We're also doing things. We're thinking about, where's the next business we're going to open? What's the next ministry assignment that God has for us? Are we to start a church here or no? No, we'll hold off. Is he calling us to start like a seasonal revival center, a 2 or 3 year assignment, or, what's he calling us to do? A house of prayer kind of a thing, or whatever, or none of that. Is he calling us to start maybe mentoring others, maybe start a school of ministry, or not at all? Are we supposed to, we've been researching real estate. Are we supposed to get into real estate a little bit more? Or are we supposed to maybe start, maybe take one of our businesses here in Branson and duplicate it maybe in another state, another nation even? Is God calling us to move to another nation? Is that possible? And so, we think about all of this all of the time, because we know, especially based on our history, that God's always up to something. And a lot of people, they're just doing the same thing, and they're not supposed to. Some of them are, some of them aren't. But what is beyond the horizon? I'll leave you all with this. I'll never forget, when I moved from Chicago to Omaha, Arkansas. Look it up. 191 people when I moved there. And it was, middle of nowhere. People walking around barefoot in overalls. For real. And some people would never leave that little town their whole life. Like ever. And it was insanity to me. And I can't imagine. This world is so huge and there's so much. And Amy and I, we've got our YouTube travel channel, and we love to travel, and man, we're just barely getting started. And there's so much in terms of ministry. There's so much, right? So much in terms of marketplace ministry and developing businesses or careers or whatever that looks like. But the adventure that's out there for always seeing what's, moving toward what's over the horizon, it's amazing. And so, and here's a great example. When I travel and I have my book table up all the time, people say, oh, there's a book in me. I've had a book in me for 10 years. I need to write a book. And I'm like, why have you waited 10 years? What's going on? Some people should be on book number 15 by now, and they haven't even started the first one. Break out of that comfort zone. Do something new. Your tomorrow, if you want it to be different than today, you got to step out of today. You got to step out of yesterday. If you want the fresh wind or the new wine, you got to let the old go, right? God's got a new wineskin for you. So, yeah, some people are supposed to stay locked in. If you're supposed to stay locked in, stay locked in. But some people, God is calling you to move, and to move often, and to shift, and to change, and be dynamic, and be flexible, and be ready in season, be instant in season and out of season. Because there very well may be a whole bunch of people out in maybe West Virginia somewhere, or in California somewhere, or in Costa Rica somewhere, or in the United Kingdom somewhere, right? Or 5 hours away to another city in your state, or there's assignments. What has God called you to? So I want to encourage you with that. Don't stay glued down if you're supposed to be mobile. Don't stay locked in if you're supposed to be unlocked. Don't unlock if you're supposed to be locked. But simply know. I'll tell you this, even if you are supposed to stay in the same church, or in the same ministry, or the same job, or the same city, God is always doing something new. And He wants to use you in brand new ways. And so start to get creative, quit playing it safe, and see what He has for you over that horizon.
Thank you for listening to The Furnace with John Burton. You can access media, read articles, and partner with the ministry online at burton.tv. And by all means, share this podcast with those who are hungry for revival, reformation, and revolution.